Neither of you drive Teslas, right?
No.
Okay. You have no idea. It's Wednesday, November 16th, 2022, and after a long time away, this is KBIA's Views of the News. Our roundtable on media behaviors comes to you from the Futures Lab studio at the Reynolds Journalism Institute. I'm Amy Simons, and here with me are my colleagues Kathy Kiley and Ernest Perry. On our program this week, on the heels of last week's midterm elections, the special announcement from former President Donald Trump. We'll talk about how journalists should approach their coverage this time around. We're going to talk about an Ohio reporter who is arrested and charged with illegal wiretapping after publishing a court recording that he had obtained. And mass layoffs at Facebook parent company Meta signal a breakaway from news partnerships, while Jeff Bezos' Amazon announces it too will be cutting staff right before the big holiday shopping season. There's a lot more that hopefully we will get to today, but we're going to start with all that's happened in the past few weeks at Twitter. Once a golden darling of social media, the microblogging site coined the public square of the internet. Now members are walking away, abandoning their accounts for newcomers such as Mastodon. New owner Elon Musk is cutting staff dramatically, including many key executives, ordering an immediate end of work from home and threatening an imminent bankruptcy. There are so many different aspects of this story which seem in some ways to be evolving hourly. I want to break those down with the two of you. First, the dramatic efforts at cost cutting, the laying off the staff, and curiously now this abandoned plan to sell blue verification check marks, which was really once upon a time one of our biggest guardrails against misinformation and disinformation, because that's how the user could know it was coming from a reliable source.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing.
Okay.
It's not as if we didn't see this coming.
Oh, no,
it's
we
not
did. We've been talking about this for months.
Yeah, it's not as if he didn't say these are the things that I'm going to do. And so the layoffs, he said that there were too many people. Mm-hmm. That not only the corporate ranks, but the actual workers themselves were just too many of them. Mm-hmm. So we saw that coming. The fact that he was basically saying that Twitter needs to be more open. It needs to be available for everyone. And so I'm going to take down these guardrails because I feel as if, that shouldn't be what Twitter does. We should be basically kicking former presidents off and doing all these other things. So again, none of this should have been a surprise when he said he was going to do it, and he did it. I think at the speed at which he's done it is what has sort of caught everyone off guard. I mean, I think there are people that were thinking, well, he'd get in and he'd gradually see that these are things that keep Twitter being at the top of its game. It keeps the stock prices up, this sort of thing. So he'll gradually do some things, but it won't be all at once. Well, he did it all at once.
Well, and he's also doing things and then undoing things
right
at the same time. So, I mean, it fits and it feeds the image of Elon Musk as a very impulsive guy. And so that is not going to help with investors. Mm-hmm. And the other thing is that Twitter's biggest problem, Twitter never made money. That was always the big problem.
And, it found investors, but it never made money.
Right. And also, I think for the media, and I say this as somebody who was a heavy Twitter user, of all the social networks, I use that the most, that, there was this sense that the workers owned the means of production, and that's never true, right? And so this idea that this thing that the media used and was really relying on to market itself is now being, the reputation is now being besmirched in a way that I think most reporters should probably stay away from it. And so I think that's where the shock has come from. It's in our ranks.
I mean, many of the advertisers, I mean, that's the one thing that did, sort of take me by surprise, was the fact that many of the advertisers that use Twitter, I mean, they have moved away very quickly. I mean,
Absolutely.
that was the one thing that sort of startled me. I thought maybe they would hang in there just to see what was going to happen, but they were just like, nope. I'm out of here.
And in a lot of ways, it's because this platform became a liability very quickly as these changes came on. What happened with Eli Lilly is an example right there, that a parody or a fake account was created, and a tweet going out about Eli Lilly and costs of different prescription drugs, and shocked the market in that moment. And if you are an advertiser and your company, your corporation can stand to lose half of its valuation because of a bad actor out there.
Well, I mean, again, I think this kind of goes to a point that you were making, is that people sort of looked at Twitter as almost like a public utility, almost like you're going and flipping on your light switch and expect the lights to come on and that sort of thing. It was never that.
Or it never should have been that.
It never should have been that.
People may have thought it was, but it never should have reached that
But as
level.
we talk about all the time, perception becomes reality.
True.
And
True.
for a lot of people, the reality for them in terms of Twitter was that it was always going to be there. It was going to operate in this certain way. And yeah, there would be changes and it would evolve over time, but it wasn't going to, totally morph into what we're seeing now under Elon Musk. And I think that's what many of the advertisers looked at and were like, whoa, wait a minute, this is not what I bought into.
Well, I think this goes back to a really kind of early notion of the internet, the whole idea of the wisdom of the crowd, which I think we've discovered is not so wise. And so you saw Twitter putting guardrails on, and now Musk taking it off. I think that's what scares advertisers. They don't want their brands to be associated with the kind of hate speech that is starting to reappear on Twitter. And I think this is kind of a larger, or this may be the beginning of a larger trend with social media. Social media has always been seen as, a lot of people who use it, particularly young people who use it to get their news, think of it as something like legacy media. It's not. The people who run social media don't view themselves as publishers. They don't have the same legal liability that publishers or television broadcasters do. And so I just wonder if we're now starting to see a real meltdown and things are going to start to level off in a way that there was a real spike and social media was the thing, and now I wonder if that's going to continue, because I think Musk is just the beginning.
And I think it's also opened it up for other players, Mastodon and others, to come in and say, hey, we're going to corner this part of the market, because we're going to basically say, look, we will protect you until we can't. Right. That therein lies the problem, and I think you described it very well.
Well, or the other way that this could go is government could decide this is a public utility, and you could see regulations, government regulations, and in some ways, Zuckerberg has almost invited that in some of his public statements. So, we'll see. But I think this really marks a big turning point for social media.
It really does. One of the things that I wanted to bring up too was a memo that was shared with us here at KBIA that came from NPR and went out to all of the member stations with some guidance, not necessarily policy, but guidance to perhaps change how you're promoting Twitter on the air. So for those of you who stick around to the very end of the show, you may hear me say some things a little differently. To verify everything, think of it even more so like a police scanner. Using those blue checks is not going to be that visual guarantee anymore. But moreover, the guidance that we got from NPR was not to give up your Twitter account. no matter what you're trying to do or how you want to use it. How you want to use it personally is your decision, but don't close your account. Don't deactivate your account, because that gives up your Twitter handle and opens the door for bad actors to come in and take your handle. Somebody could become at Amy Simons or at I'm trying to think of an NPR person.
I did exactly that. I was an early adopter of Twitter, and I have my name as my
so
handle.
So do I. And how many of us at this point do?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so I mothballed my account. Essentially, it's still my account. It's still there. I've just taken the app off of all of my devices, and I pinned a tweet at the top saying that I'm taking a pause. And I did that after Musk retweeted disinformation about the attack on Paul Pelosi. And I felt that as a journalist, I didn't want to be on the same platform as someone where the owner was actually spreading disinformation. So I think that's up to an individual, but I took exactly that approach for exactly that reason. I didn't want to give up my handle.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that may open the door to regulation, because I remember, and it still happens, but not as much anymore, when the public started to complain about not being able to take their cell phone number to another carrier.
Porting a cell phone number,
A cell phone number. So this may be the opening that regulators see as a way to go in and say, okay, if this is your your Twitter handle, if this is your social media handle, then you get to carry it from place to place. It belongs to you, and you can port it.
That's an interesting idea.
Yeah.
Especially because I'm thinking about how my Instagram handle isn't the same as, because I wasn't an early adopter there. Twitter isn't the only one of the tech giants that is shedding jobs right now. And Jeff Bezos has noted that cuts are coming at Amazon. There have been mass layoffs at Facebook's parent company, Meta, which have included several roles which were key to its connections to the news industry. Meta cut 11,000 positions, and among those were the person who ran the Meta Journalism Project Accelerator, the person who led news partnerships here and in Southeast Asia, a program manager for news, two for news integrity, and a bunch of other comms jobs. And when we talk about Twitter and how we've lost some of the curbs there to fight mis and disinformation, this is really disheartening news to see Facebook make this move now too.
But to echo Ernest, it's not a surprise, because Facebook has always been, it's been like Lucy and Charlie Brown with the football. They're always holding out that and saying, we're going to help you, news industry, we're going to help you. Just put videos, move to video and put videos
now
on
go
our
live.
network. And exactly. And every time, there was this move to video, I can remember a ton of news organizations laid off a bunch of reporters, hired a bunch of videographers, and the next thing you know, Facebook changes its policy. So this should not surprise us. I think the biggest problem for any publisher or broadcaster right now is they don't own the platform. And so they're constantly trying to figure out, what does Google want? What does Mark Zuckerberg want? And every time the football gets pulled away from them. So I think, interestingly, Maria Ressa, the Nobel Peace Prize laureate, is trying to build her own platform.
Really?
Which, yes. And the idea is that news organizations, legitimate news organizations, are not going to be so dependent on these platforms. And we'll see how that works. I think it's a really laudable but difficult task.
Yeah, I'm wondering how we get audiences to it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think that's the big challenge.
And that's the problem. I mean, there have been many in the news business, as well as in social media and other communications outlets, which have been screaming since the 1990s that one of the biggest issues that newspapers and television news organizations need to grapple with is that they don't control the distribution outlet. And when they allowed Mark Zuckerberg and others to basically build that and control that, they lost it. And the only other thing they had was the content. And in many cases, they had already put that out for free. So they had lost the ability to be able to do that because the public in their mind is like, hey, if it's out there on social media, if it's out there within the internet ecospace, then it should be free to everyone. So when you lost that ability, you created a problem, and they have yet to be able to deal with that, with the exception of the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, because of the weight of it, Washington Post, now that it has Bezos money. So you have some players out there that have been able to monetize their content and distribute it in different ways to be able to deal with that. But the majority, good luck to you, because you over a generation now, you have allowed Mark Zuckerberg, Musk, and others to basically control the distribution outlets, and thus they control the ecospace.
So you bring up Bezos and his money and controlling of the distribution channels. There's a story in Monday's New York Times that breaks that he's going to be laying off another 10,000 at Amazon, almost simultaneously to CNN releasing an interview that he's going to give away the bulk of his wealth during his lifetime. We've heard that before from others like Bill Gates, whatever. He gives his first, 100 million to Dolly Parton, because she doesn't have a whole lot to work with there. Sense of sarcasm. But the other news that came out of there is that he's looking at adding the Washington Commanders to his portfolio. And this is coming out in the season where Amazon Prime has taken Thursday Night Football. And I know Ernest is just making the face like, and this surprises you why? It's the one we get more now than it's not about you. This surprises you why?
Yeah, I mean, soon as I heard that.
And by the way, he hasn't talked to the current Commanders owners, but
the current Commanders owners have turned that over to Bank of America.
Okay,
they basically said, hey, because they're having so much legal trouble right now themselves.
Yeah, fair enough.
Okay, so they turned it over to Bank of America and said, hey, find somebody to buy this. As soon as I saw that, I went like, Jeff Bezos would do this. I mean, think
it's a good move?
Well, hey, it's either going to be Jeff Bezos or Donald Trump, and Donald Trump's been trying to buy an NFL team forever. They just won't let him into the club.
Won't let him in the club.
They will definitely let Jeff Bezos into the club. Because as you said, he's already got Thursday Night Football. And he's already been advertising all over the NFL for a very long time. So why not have him as part of the club of an NFL owner? I could easily see it
I was
happen.
just about to ask a really dumb question.
The Washington Amazonians.
Well, and I was just about to ask a really dumb question about the potential ethics of the Post then covering local football, but I worked for the Tribune for how many years and they own the Cubs, so why would I even ask that question?
Right.
Okay, so we weren't on the air last Wednesday to talk through the results of the midterm elections, but maybe that's for the best, since so much of the big election news happened last Wednesday and, well, straight through to last night. There were no big surprises here in Missouri, except maybe the margins by which Amendment 3 passed.
That didn't surprise me.
No?
No, not at all.
No, that didn't surprise me. I think one thing that came out of this, and I think we'll see it play out in the next year too, the changes in the state legislative lines, I think long term could have an interesting effect. Here in Boone County, there was one seat flipped that had been occupied by a Republican, Chuck Basie, who retired, and the new lawmaker is going to be a Democrat. And I think that was largely due to changes in the district lines. What's interesting is, Boone County was very badly gerrymandered for the congressional seats.
Right down
Columbia
Broadway.
is divided, so the poor mayor of Columbia has to go to two different members of Congress anytime she needs anything. And it's a terrible gerrymander. But the state law, the new state law says that they must avoid splitting counties. So that means the state Senate seat could go Democrat. And the Democrats did pick up some seats in the Missouri State Legislature. So it'll be interesting to see. I think one reason we've seen so many of these statewide referenda is that the legislature is more conservative than the state. and that's due to gerrymandering. That's due to how the district lines are drawn. And so when you have a legislature that's not doing the will of the people, they put things on a statewide ballot.
And that's something that's happening throughout the country. I mean, more and more you're seeing referenda come up in states where you just have either you have gridlock or you have state legislatures that are spending more time with dealing with
wedge issues
and social issues as opposed to doing the business of the state, doing the business of making sure that education is taken care of, making sure that roads and bridges are taken care of, making sure that health care and those issues are taken care of. So the public is basically saying, hey, if you won't do it in the legislature, we're going to force you through a referendum.
Yeah, and you can see it happened with expanding Medicare in this state. It happened with
Right to work.
Right to work.
Yeah.
So I think over and over again you're seeing that, and I think at some point the legislature needs to get the message. And of course, the other thing that the legislature did was, through some clever wording and timing, overrode a public referendum on taking the drawing of district lines out of the hands of politicians.
Right.
And
they're doing
this,
and now they're doing the
commission.
same thing, or at least the attorney general, I can't remember if it's the attorney general or secretary of state, is trying to do the same thing with libraries. It's like, how do you think that's going to play over? Because what's going to happen is that, okay, if you pass this thing, then you're going to have a referendum that come out from all these parents basically saying, hey, what about local control? And this is the thing that's really concerning here, is that these are the same people who a decade ago were clamoring for local control, and now they're taking away local control at the state level. So, I mean, I have an issue with that, and that's, I mean, we could talk about it being a part of a particular party, but really what it is that we want to have local control
when it's convenient.
When it's convenient, and that's a problem, whether you're talking about Democrat or Republican.
Two other races of national interest. They weren't really national races, but I want to talk about the Arizona governor's race, where Kari Lake has been defeated. I want to talk about the Pennsylvania Senate race, where Dr. Oz has been defeated. What's
Two
next?
media figures going down in flames.
Exactly. And that's kind of what I want to talk about. And we can start with Dr. Oz. Like, where does he go next? Because he gave up what really, from the media part of who he gave up everything for that race. And even Oprah Winfrey, who made him, backed away and wanted no part of him. Like, where does he go now? Because it's not daytime TV.
Well, it's going to be interesting. It's not just him, it's Kari Lake, it's others. Where do they go now? Because they've linked themselves to now 2024 presidential candidate, former President
we'll
Donald
talk about
Trump.
him in a second.
And I know we're going to talk about it. But again, it's okay, now that you've linked yourself to this, how do you then begin to move away from that or move on to something else when that is sort of what made you? I mean, if you stay in politics, you're definitely linked to that. If you try to go back to where you were, you're tainted by that. So, I mean, they've got some real issues.
And in his case, it's not about going back to any kind of practice, because he's been tied to so much junk science, too. Like, he's literally on an iceberg. One of the things about Kari Lake, and I think one of the reasons I was most interested in that, was the way she went about threatening journalists through her entire campaign, too. Forget about her being even tied to the former president and jumping on the QAnon theories and all of that. She flat out went against journalists and in the profession, claiming we didn't know what we were doing, and she was going to school us all once she was governor to make our profession right again.
Well, the question there is, was she ever really a journalist? I mean, she practiced journalism, but if you're a journalist, you're supposed to abide by a code of ethics.
Well, and from what I've read, until the past few years, she was relatively well respected in the Phoenix market where she was an anchor. That she really fell off of the cliff about 4 or 5 years ago.
Well, I've read articles where her former coworkers are really shocked by this. But the thing is, I mean, we see it in every profession. There are opportunists who are willing to upend everything they're supposed to stand for in order to seize an opportunity. And We have them in our
some would say
profession
the
too.
same thing about J.D. Vance in Ohio. I mean, and how he sort of turned the other way.
Yeah,
and
but he
did the
won.
same thing. I mean, yes, he won.
He won. He has a job to go to in a couple of weeks.
This is true. But I mean, he gave up a lot to get that job.
Yeah.
Well, if there are so many media outlets right now that I'm sure ONA or some
OANN
or
thank
Newsmax
you. Will have a slot for her.
We'll have a slot for her and for Dr. Oz, I'm
Yes.
sure.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so
There'll
that
be somebody who will
special
take them.
announcement last night. Ernest, you and I were talking about this in a hallway conversation earlier in the week, and at first I didn't realize you were joking with me when I said, I can't believe he's going to run again. Isn't he? What about all of the advisors and what they're telling him? You're like, oh, no, you're the one. How were you surprised by this? And I was like, wait, what?
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
This
So
is your
maybe we're not
mantra
so
today.
surprised. Right, right. Maybe we're not so surprised. Are you surprised, though, by the number of people who have backed away? I look at Ivanka Trump's statements of like, we're not in it this time. We're out of here. Eric, the only one of his family members there
Not
last
after the
night.
midterm. I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised that they're backing away after the midterms when there was supposed to be this red wave that came through, and what was it? It was a trickle.
It was a drop. It was a drizzle.
I mean, looks like they're gonna, instead of having this wave come through, they've lost the Senate and they may lose it by another 2 seats, and then they got the
Well,
the
they're
House.
going to gain seats in the Senate.
Yeah.
They've gained at least one,
Right.
and they'll possibly gain 2. I think they'll most likely gain 2 now.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. And then in the House, okay, you got the House, but now they're going to be fighting each other so much they'll never get anything done. So, I mean, this doesn't surprise me at all.
Well, the other thing with the election results, and I think Ernest is right, it's because where Republicans lost, it was Trump Republicans who lost. And so that, the voters, I think, sent a pretty strong message about preferring the middle. There was a lot of ticket splitting. The Republicans who succeeded were more mainstream Republicans who are willing to, what a dirty word, compromise.
And how much of that do you think might have also been about the recency of the Dobbs decision and women
I think
and
it played a
people
huge
who
role.
are supporting a woman's right to choose, wanting to move toward that codifying both of women's right to choose, of gay marriage, of some of those social and wedge issues?
I think that helped drive young voters.
Okay.
And we saw an unusually high turnout of young voters. And
that's got to be scary to the boomer and Gen X conservative base, too.
Right. And it should be scary to Ron DeSantis. But they're going to not look at that. But I'm telling you, if they don't pay attention to that and they go down the Ron DeSantis route, they could be in trouble again.
I think that's right. And I think, those of us who are talking to young people every day, I think you would both agree with me. This is a generational thing. And the cultural wedge issues, if they work at all, they work in a counterintuitive way for it hurts the Republicans with this generation.
Right.
And it doesn't matter whether they are Republicans or Democrats. They are much more tolerant, and they are pro-gay rights. They are pro-abortion rights. And it's just, I think you're right. I mean, we're seeing a big sea change.
Okay. Well, we are pretty much out of time for this week. I'd like to thank you for spending your half hour with us. Read more about the topics we talked today and a whole lot we didn't get to because we were kind of fired up. You can read about each of those on our links blog under the programs and podcast tabs at kbia.org. We're also available wherever you get your podcast downloads, including iTunes and Stitcher. You can follow us on social media. These are all great ways to watch and listen to our program again. Leave comments, questions, see previews of what we'll be talking about on our next program, and more. Thanks to Travis McMillan, to Kyle Felling, and Tim Pilcher for original theme music. I'm Amy Simons. We'll see you in 2 weeks.